Hello and welcome to week 12 of Info 655 Digital Preservation Curation. This is week 4 of our module on access, and in this week we're going to be talking about evaluating that access that we've created. It's not enough to just sit back and put something out there and say, well, we did good enough. What we really want to be doing is returning to that and looking at it and understanding, is that really good enough? Has that access that we've provided provided the things that we wanted to do? Have people actually been using it? Are there ways that we could be improving that over time? So in talking about this, let's talk about our plan. So first we're going to talk a little bit about what we might want to do when thinking about an evaluation project. What are the ideas behind an evaluation project? What are the facets of analysis? And then I'm going to walk through a couple of in-person evaluation methods, and then a set on what we can do at looking at users from a distance, performing analytics research on collection usage. So the key points here are, number one, evaluation has to be part of a program. It has to be, you have to be dedicating some amount of your work to figuring out how good your work is. Otherwise, you will never have a sense of how good that access platform is. So it is a critical part of planning, is to say, how much time can we actually put into making sure that this access system that we've built is good. Now, when you are running an evaluation program, you will have to have a framework to gather information on. And one of the common frameworks that you will hear is talking about gathering specific, measurable, achievable, and relevant and time-based goals, and using those goals to build out the evaluation that you want to do. That's just one framework, but I do like it, and it's at least a basis to build your own work off of. Next, once you have your goals and you have an idea of what you want to gather, well, then you're going to figure out how you're going to get that information. And that method of evaluation is going to be dependent on those goals. So not all things can be measured with the same set of tools, and be ready to be flexible along those lines. The final thing is, and I think this is particularly pertinent because of the role that we play within the public and the trust that we want to have with the public, is that we need to be clear and careful about the kinds of information that we gather and how we store it and how we make use of it over time, because a lot of times this is very personally identifiable information, and it's something that might go against the ethics of our organization if we collect it callously, if we manage it callously, or even if we collect it at all. So we need to be thinking about that ethical portion of it while we are doing any kind of evaluation. So let's get into the development of an evaluation project. So in order to figure out things like whether there are barriers to access, whether people are coming to your website and then leaving immediately because they find it is an inaccessible website, whether that big project that you've been working on for the past 2 years is actually being used by people, whether you have to make a choice to say, which of our products, which parts of our website need to have more investment in order to reach their needs, or which ones are the most important ones that we need to put more time into, or maybe even to tell a funder or donor, this is how good we've been doing, but here's where the gaps are in terms of what we've been doing. All of these things will require some sort of evaluation that you run. And most likely you're going to run that evaluation on your own services. So you have these challenges sitting in front of you. You need to know this information, so you need to plan out an evaluation. Now, as I mentioned, you need to then figure out the goals of that evaluation. You need to figure out what are you measuring against. And one of the things that people will tell you about is this idea of the SMART framework. It is to have a series of goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. Now, like all acronym-based frameworks, there's definitely some fudging of these words in order to have a nice, catchy acronym. SMART is a great, catchy acronym. You will find that this framework will, of course, not fully be able to confine all of the ideas that you might want to include in an evaluation, but it is a good start, and a good start is all that we can ask for from any model. And so this is what I often turn to when I'm trying to think about what I want to do. If you find that this framework isn't good for you, then that's of course very much within the realm of possibility. Anyway, so talking about specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based, let's go into some of those in detail. So specific, we want to make sure that we are measuring for very testable things. We don't want to go for a generic question like, am I doing all right? We need to have specific questions along the lines of, are users able to find collections using the metadata indexed in our search function? Or are users able to find materials related to their initial interest? Or are users able to navigate our digital collections using a screen reader? Each of these are in a very specific question, and it allows you to actually have a definitive answer to it. Like, yes, I can say if they can navigate our collections using a screen reader. I can add caveats to that, of course, but it gets us down to a dimension that we can then look at and we can say, are we doing well enough, rather than trying to paper over gaps in what we're doing by saying, yeah, generally okay. So specificity is really a help when you're doing an evaluation. Measurable. So, again, going from a very generic and a very broad or subjective view of something that you want to test, like, is our website accessible? You can ask for something like, how many WCAG errors or warnings do we receive when using the Wave tool? Or how long does it take with a screen reader to navigate a collection of search results versus someone that does not use one? Or what is the ratio of users that enable captions on our videos? So all of these things are things that you can gather as numbers, and that means that you could perform this evaluation on a regular basis, maybe once a year, and you can slowly get an idea of the trends that are happening and where you are doing worse or better over time, rather than just saying, yes, we're doing well, we're doing a little bit more well. It's hard to use subjective evaluations in order to chart that progress. But if you have some numbers, you can at least show some progress to somebody else. The next one, relevant. Does the evaluation meet the current mission and strategy for our organization, particularly when it comes to your designated community? Remember that this whole idea of the designated community is that you as an organization are defining who you think is the audience that you are trying to reach the most, and you are building out services in relationship to that. And so thinking about your goals and thinking about what you're measuring, you always want to have those people that you want to be working with front and center, and thinking about, okay, how can I make sure that the evaluation that I'm performing is actually gathering data about this community? So an example of an audience, you could have the general public, you could have students, you can have scholars of a specific discipline, you could have members of a local community, you could have people of color, you could have online users. The more specifically that you define this, the better questions that you can ask during your evaluation. And just to give some examples of how that audience can change your evaluation, instead of asking what frustrations do users have, you can start putting in specific user groups. What frustrations do visually impaired users have? What frustrations do people of color have? What frustrations do students have when accessing my digital collections portal? All of these things will have different kinds of answers that really change the outcomes of the evaluation that you perform. All right, so that's our general kind of metrics that we want to be framing around. The SMART framework is one way, again, but you can come up with other ways as you're building out your questions and testing to make sure that these questions are going to gather good information. The next thing that you need to figure out is how you want to collect that data. Generally, your questions are going to guide you into choosing what you want to do. as will the ethics of your organization when it comes to being able to identify users and what tools are available to you, for you to work with. But I like to split these into two different things. Number one, working directly with users, so doing things like interviews and surveys and talking to people that are using your services. And number two, collecting data from a distance. So getting data without actually interacting with the users themselves, but interacting with data either logged from their work that they perform or from their interactions with your website.